welcome to Frugal Over 50. I'm Amy and I'm happy to welcome you here to my channel where we talk about everything related to frugality, minimalism, and intentional living, especially aimed at the needs of the mature woman. If you're new here, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here on my almost brand new YouTube channel, and I hope that you'll consider subscribing and clicking the like button if you end up enjoying this video. In this video, I'd like to do the second in what I hope is a long series of reviews. And in this series of reviews, I'll be looking at books, websites, blogs, anything else that comes my way related to personal finance. And what I'll do is tell you a little bit about what I've read, what I've seen, what I've listened to, and describe the content, describe the tone, talk about what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what's the particular takeaway for women over 50, if you are in that category, or anybody else if you're just interested in this content overall. And then whether I recommend this source of information for me and for you. I would like to start with an author named Jeff Yeager. Jeff Yeager is originally from Ohio, from a small town in Ohio, near where my family is from, although I don't know this guy at all. And he spent his career working as an executive director and sort of upper management, working for a company that runs youth hostel trips. So as you might imagine, he never became rich, but he was able to retire at age 47. And he's doing pretty well, still kicking around today. So he wrote a book about how to retire as a cheapskate. He identifies himself as a cheapskate. He's very proud of that. And he wanted to share what he knew. So this book is one in a series of books that Mr. Yeager has written over the years aimed at helping people to live really, he calls it as a cheapskate, but basically you're living on less than what you make. It's like that, but sort of in an extreme way for some people. And so what he has done in this particular book is talk about how different people who also identify as cheapskates or just as frugal, how they are planning for or how they are living in retirement. So the content of this book is not a guide to how to be frugal in retirement. It is not a set of steps that you can take to live on less money. It is not this is what you should do 5 years from retirement, this is what you should do 1 year from retirement. It's not that sort of a guide. It, in essence, is a series of case studies. He calls them stories, which means that he has gone and interviewed somebody or a couple or a family and talked to them about their lives and how they have lived frugally, how they are either aiming themselves at a frugal retirement, he calls it a cheapskate retirement, or how they have arrived at that position. And every single story is unique. It's different kinds of people, very different demographics, everything from people who never earned above poverty wages all the way up to people who are really quite wealthy and just about everything in between. And he says in his book, as you read this, that if you identify with all of them, there's probably a problem with your personality. You should really only be identifying with a few of them, but hopefully you can learn from everybody's story. So this is the content. Now the tone of this particular book is what I would call folksy. And it's just how it is. I have noticed this as I'm diving into personal finance reading, that some things are this, we will empower you kind of a tone, and some things are this sort of, you need to do better tone, and other things are very much like reading, I guess what I would think of as like an accounting textbook. This is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is the formula, that sort of thing. And then there's this other subcategory that I call folksy, that's like, I'm gonna sit down and tell you what your grandma would have done, sort of a thing. And he falls more into that last kind of folksy category. I enjoyed it to a point, because I listened to the audiobook. I got it from my library, listened to the audiobook, and the guy who read the audiobook sounds a little bit like Christian Slater, who I've been a fan of Christian Slater since I was a teen and went to watch Heathers at the movie theaters, and I'm a big fan of Mr. Robot now. So, you know, Christian Slater reading a book about personal finance, count me in. It was great. After a while, for me, the tone just got a little bit cloying, is an old-fashioned British word for it. It just got a little bit too sickly sweet. But I think that if I had been reading it, it wouldn't have hit me that way, because I could have dipped in and out of different stories, and if one didn't interest me, I could have moved ahead. As it was, I wanted to listen to everything. Now, that's just a personal preference. There are lots and lots of people who are huge fans of this folksy approach to finance, and I completely understand that. So if you like that, I think if you were, say, a fan of somebody like Dave Ramsey, who also writes in that style, you'd probably really appreciate Jeff Yeager's sort of sense of humor and his tone. It's kind of similar. Now, what really worked for me from this book was the fact that all of the stories put together paint a picture of possibility, so that I don't really know exactly how my story fits in with any of the stories that I read. I don't know. I don't see myself directly in any one of the many stories or any one of the many interviews that he did. But each one had something that I could take away, that I could think, oh, that gives me an idea. And because that was true for each of them, it was a very thought-provoking read, or in my case, a very thought-provoking listen. I really, really found it just gave me a lot to consider. There was, for instance, one gentleman who had really never made above poverty wages, but he and his 6 siblings still own their parents' family home, and they rent it out and use it for family functions and that sort of thing. And he lives in a little tiny apartment, and he does fine. He has a great life. And then on the way other end of the spectrum, there's a couple that retired early from a business. They own property in California. Who owns property in California, right? And they spent like 15 years sailing in the Pacific. And then when they got bored of that, they went bicycling across the United States. So, you know, all of these variations from quite poor to quite wealthy, and how people lived frugally in the middle of any particular economic circumstance, it really gave me sort of a sense of empowerment, I would say, even though that wasn't necessarily the tone of the book, and it gave me a sense of possibility. In my particular case, what it did was it reinforced for me that sort of sick feeling that I get in the pit of my stomach when I spend too much money for me. And sometimes I don't even know, especially because I'm fairly new to budgeting. I haven't always known why I felt that sort of sick feeling. And now I understand. I think I have an inner cheapskate in there who really wants to get out. I have been keeping track of my cash envelope system since late January, and I'm loving it. I go and count my cash and my coins every week, and it's so exciting. It's just the tip of the iceberg for me. And the idea that there are people who have been doing this all of their lives and into retirement and are seeing the benefits in that they can retire how they want to. They can live comfortably and they can live frugally. It means a lot to me. And a big part of that is that I really felt an identification with people who feel most comfortable spending less. I was surprised about that because I grew up in poverty, not desperate poverty, as I've mentioned before, but poverty. And because of that, I became middle class and thought, well, I should spend more money. I have more money. And that's certainly true. There were things that I was not able to have as a child that I really needed, and now I can have those, and that's wonderful. But beyond that, what do I need? I don't know. How can I do something? How can I get something without spending money? This is becoming my new question. Now, let me talk about what didn't work for me in this. One of the things that really didn't work was the ongoing folksy tone, and I'll tell you why. I talked about that in the beginning of this video, but it didn't work for me personally because I found that it made me feel a little bit like he was saying, I don't know, maybe, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe it, and I'm not going to edit this out. I'm just going to talk as I think here. It's not exactly that Jeff Yeager is treating the reader as if they are unintelligent, because that is certainly not the vibe that I got. It's not the sense that I got at all. But it's more of a sort of a, hey, let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about this little story. And it just gets to be a bit much for me. I don't have a sense of what kind of writing I will really gravitate towards yet in the world of personal finance reading. I just don't know. I haven't found anything that I think, ha, that's it. That's my style. But this wasn't quite it for me. And it took away to some degree from the message, because I think I was looking for something behind those stories, something that would give a sense of heft to it. Because the stories themselves were quite intense. People talking about the things that they've done to save money, to earn money, to live frugally. They were quite intense and in depth. And I wish that the tone of the book had worked for me better. If you read the book, you may have a completely different experience than I'm having as I read it, or as I listen to it, I guess I should say, and that's fine, because everybody should be able to take away from books like this what they find most helpful. So my main takeaway from this was actually positive. I say I didn't like the tone, but the content was really powerful, and my main takeaway from this was that I can indeed retire and be comfortable. Now, I had a confirmation of this when I talked to my financial planner the other day, and she said to me as we looked over my future, she projected out to age 90, which I found a little bit scary and overwhelming, and she said the real key for you is going to be to limit your spending. And it felt so good to hear that, because it came in conjunction with this book that I was listening to and these new ideas that I'm having and that I'm practicing and that I'm sharing with you. And it really felt wonderful. It felt very empowering to hear that. Like, I'm going to be okay. And the skills that I'm learning, that I'm practicing, that I'm sharing with you, that I'm reading about, they're going to help me as I go through my life. And I just feel great about that. Now, here is the final thing. Would I recommend this for you to read? And the answer I would have to say is yes. I actually would recommend this. Again, not everybody is as affected by the tone of a certain book as I am. I tend to be super aware of these things, and it's a little bit oversensitive. And I think the content is valuable. I enjoyed the audiobook reader, and if you got the book from your library and read it, I think you would be able to dip into and out of stories that you liked. So actually, I do recommend it, and I don't recommend that you wait until you're close to retirement age. If you're watching this and you're younger than I am, go ahead and read it, because there are interviews with and stories about people who are still in their 20s and talking about how they live frugally and how they have lived frugally since they were in their teens or even earlier. So it's actually inspiring for people at any age. And so I do actually recommend it. Now, my final thought, if you get interested in this and you decide to look up some information about Jeff Yeager, he has sort of disappeared from social media, from the internet in the last 2 years. He and his wife moved to Croatia, from what I understand, from the little bit that I was able to decipher, because they were deeply upset, as many people were, by the outcome of the 2016 presidential election here in the United States. And he ended up just moving away from social media entirely and going to travel the world. Now, if you do look up the information about how that came to be, you'll see that it looks kind of like a public departure. I'm not sure that he intended it that way, but he was a bit of a public figure at the time that he left. He worked for the AARP. He was a correspondent for, I think it was for the public broadcasting system. So he had a national presence and then just sort of disappeared from that. But, you know, there are a lot of people who like to spend their retirement traveling. And whatever this gentleman's motivation was, and whatever we might think of it, there are all sorts of people who leave the country, whatever their country is, for all sorts of reasons throughout their lives. And the fact of the matter is that Jeff Yeager and his wife were able to go wherever they wanted because they have lived frugally all of their lives. And that particular aspect of Jeff Yeager's retirement and his current living in retirement is particularly inspiring to me, because I would love to be able to move to a lower cost of living area, to be near family, and to be someplace from which I could travel easily and cheaply. And that idea that it's possible is very inspiring to me. All right, I'm going to leave some information in the description box below about Jeff Yeager's books, and if you are interested, if you find this subject captivating at any age, I highly recommend that you look this guy up and read at least one of his books. Maybe this one, maybe one of the others. This is my review. It is 1.5 thumbs up, and for you, it might be 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Read it and let me know what you think. If you have read Jeff Yeager's works, or if you have seen any of his YouTube videos or looked at anything online about him, what do you think of his perspective about living extremely on less? Do you enjoy it? Do you find it inspiring, empowering? What do you think? Let me know. All right, if you liked this video and if you like this kind of content, I hope that you will join this growing YouTube channel. I hope that you will subscribe, and please give this video a like and click the notification bell so that you can be notified as soon as a new video gets posted. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.